Hey, friends, I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast. And at least for our West Coast attendees, welcome to the afternoon segment of Selling Forward. I'm really pleased to introduce Sally Duby, CSO from Bridge Group, along with her guest, Lori Harmon, VP of Cloud Sales for NetApp. They're going to talk through the steps that NetApp has taken to enable their sales team during the season of change and what successes and challenges they've experienced. I hear Sally is also going to preview some new data from the latest Bridge Group report on how hundreds of sales teams are making the best of the current circumstances. Now, let's get into it.
Hi, thanks and welcome to our session. This is Sally Duby, and I am CSO and partner of the Bridge Group. And for those of you who don't know, the Bridge Group has been consulting and leading modern trends in sales development and inside sales way before it was fashionable, actually. We wrote the sales development playbook, and for over 13 years, we published free research on compensation and metrics in sales development and inside sales. And I'm honored to have Lori Harmon join me. Lori is VP of Cloud Sales at NetApp. And for those of you who don't know Lori, you need to know her. And she is a published author of 42 Rules for Building a High Velocity Inside Sales Team. She's an active supporter of the sales leadership community. She publishes blogs, advises, and coaches other sales leaders as well. And Lori and I go way back. We've known each other for many years. We work together at Network General. Welcome, Lori. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks, Sally. I'm really glad to be here and looking forward to the interview.
Thank you. So before Lori and I really dive into a lot of the nitty-gritty details about what she's been finding along this journey, I want to give you sort of a quick overview and lay of the land of where we are today. So back in April, we did some really quick research in partnership with RevOps Squared to really find out how companies were initially reacting to the pandemic crisis. And so we had 110 companies that responded. All were B2B software SaaS companies. And what we found was that actually about 30% of those laid off AEs or sales teams. The median was actually it was 40%, which was quite a lot higher than what we were thinking. And only 21% had reduced SDR staff. We also found the biggest impact of layoffs was the market segment that they served. They sold into companies under 1 billion, were much more likely to have reduced sales staff than the larger companies. And we also found that of the companies that laid off AEs, 60% reduced quotas. And for those companies that didn't do any layoffs back in April of AEs, only 24% reduced quota, but a third of those actually reduced non-quota metrics like activities, pipeline, demos, those kinds of things. And so we're going to keep doing these short surveys as we move through the various stages of this crisis to keep us all informed as to what's going on out there. But based on what we've seen so far, we really believe there is a minimum of 3 stages as we head into whatever our new normal holds. And so the first stage was really sort of the fear and the unknown. And some of you are still living in this stage, and others have just started coming out of it earlier this month. But most companies, as you know, were thrown into a state of chaos and uncertainty, which led to some companies taking severe actions, such as freezing spending, headcount reductions, and many other businesses were really forced to work from home. And employees really had a lot to adjust to in that working from home model, where they may have had a partner working from home as well, and also children were home and they had to do homeschooling all at the same time. So April was a lot of juggling and trying to figure out how we were going to make all of that work. On the sales side, we found deals which were almost over the finish line. Most of those closed for a lot of companies. However, we did find new business pipeline was kind of non-existent, and we found that pipeline building was down 75% for many companies. We found a lot of existing customers seem to be the most likely to listen to your marketing messages, and they were able to respond, and some deals were being done in that vein. We also found a lot of companies really took heed and they adjusted messaging to be more relevant to today's time, expressed a lot of compassion and ways to help in the crisis. But we did find a lot of emails were ignored and phone outreach was not as aggressive due to lack of response. But overall, companies did reevaluate their markets and focused on larger companies, which were able to tend to weather this economic storm better. For many companies, we're in stage 2, which is really adjusting to the crisis. And we're seeing again, as we see some of these loosening restrictions nationwide, we're seeing businesses start to respond more to prospecting and outreach attempts. If the message is really relevant and targeted and focused to what's going on today and talking about business ROI, value-based message, has got to be really leading the forefront of this, not just feature and functionality. For years, I've been using the analogy, your solution needs to be a painkiller, not an aspirin. But given today's time, I've updated it. Now it's your solution needs to be the vaccine, not the Tylenol to today's challenges. If you can update your messaging to be that vaccine, you're probably striking some platinum here today in our world. In effect, we're finding pipeline building is getting better for companies. We're finding phone is working really well. Email still is not working so well today. We're also seeing a lot that field sales reps really need to increase their skills using tools and technology to learn how to do business even better remotely. So they need to learn from inside sales reps. And inside sales reps need to sharpen their skills, their sales skills, to learn how to navigate multiple buyers, how to add value, and show ROI. So we found companies with deals in the $100,000 range are much more optimistic about the future than organizations which are aiming below or above those deal sizes. And so we're also finding if you're really used to doing really big deals, you may want to start really looking at different flexibility and agility, so that different pricing and packaging. So you can start off with maybe smaller deal sizes, maybe get those down in the $75,000 to the $100,000 range, get people locked in, reduce your sales cycle, and then make sure that you've got an awesome customer success team so you can really expand that business. And we have many sellers that have only sold in good times when budget wasn't really an issue and customers were actively looking for solutions. So sales reps have to really be on top of their game and become that trusted advisor to prospects. So we're thinking that companies that are investing a lot in sales enablement to up-level sales skills through continuous training and coaching will come out winners on this. Then phase 3 is still playing out as we speak. We're not sure what to expect in this phase or even when it's going to occur. And everybody's going to move into these different stages at different times. But the best way to figure out where you are and when you're moving into a new stage is really to listen to your market and buyers and pay close attention to where your buyers are on their recovery journey. And so we're finding again that the sales skills are being tested, and you're really going to need to keep working on all of that. And that's going to be continuously a theme playing out to this until we get back to some sort of new normal. So having laid all that background, Lori, can you take us through your NetApp, cloud sales COVID journey basically, but give us sort of an overview of your sales organization and structure for context for all of this.
Sure. Thanks, Sally. So just to start, in case people are not familiar with NetApp, so NetApp is a hybrid cloud data services company, and we help people manage applications and data across both cloud and on-premise types of products. And so I am going to talk about cloud today, as Sally mentioned in her question. In terms of our sales teams for cloud, we have them specifically focused in 4 areas. We have a team that works with Microsoft on a partnership, a team that works with Google, and then we have 2 teams that cover basically Amazon, but they also cover some of our other cloud products, and those are more aligned to our on-premises sales team. And so we work in different segments. Our segments happen to be, a large globals or strategic account segment, an enterprise segment, and then a commercial segment, which does happen to have a lot of fairly large accounts in the commercial segment. So just to kind of give you that high-level overview. We do have a combination of inside and field sellers, depending on, which segment they're allocated to. So we have both sides of the coin there.
That's
and
awesome.
then, thank you. In terms of our journey so far, I would say that, it's actually been pretty good based on the fact that we are considered essential business. So the great part about that is, as you said, Sally, people who were in the hopper, shall we say, close to closing, that did happen for us. We also had people who, because they were moving their employees offsite and they expected increases in the need to store data or different access to applications, they needed to increase their storage capacity. So that was obviously beneficial. And then the other thing that was beneficial is, in some cases, maybe they had not taken advantage of moving some of their workloads to the cloud, but they needed to do it during the pandemic because there was less access to the data centers. So we had people buying cloud products for business continuity, clearly, disaster recovery, and also for virtual desktops. In some cases, customers needed to get virtual desktops up and running very quickly to support their remote workforce. And we were able to do that within 24 hours for a lot of our customers. So from that perspective, it was definitely a win. Clearly, from my sales development team, and we actually call them a digital sales response team now, we have seen less people picking up the phone. It's definitely harder to find qualified leads. And with salespeople, appointments were getting canceled. So we'll see how this plays out in the next quarter. But I think the end of our fiscal year was recent, and so we didn't see as much of an impact, with that end.
Yep. That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit more about, especially with your sales development or digital, what did you call them? Digital sales?
Digital sales response.
Digital sales response. I love that term. That's a great term, by the way.
Yeah.
If you guys, what did you try? Have you found anything that is working in developing that new pipeline?
Well, yeah. I would say one of the things we did, we've always had an omni-channel approach. So we send emails, we obviously call, and we use InMails, and we're on chat. We did find after the pandemic started that we needed to spend more time on LinkedIn because people were potentially more available. Maybe they had time, or if you try to call a company phone number, there's nobody on the other end, clearly. So maybe calling them was not even an avenue to get in touch with them. So we did have to adjust our omni-channel approach from that perspective. The other thing that we changed, and this is not just for the digital sales response team, it's just across the board, we really needed to change our messaging, right? We had to, hopefully we're an empathetic company anyway, but I think being way more empathetic with what our customers and buyers are going through, that's really important to make sure the reps are doing that. And we had to focus on what was important now. We knew people need to get their virtual desktop set up, so we could talk to them about things that we felt were important to them during the pandemic, but not get off track and talk about things that we really knew weren't important. And we focus on certain verticals who may need, more assistance during this time. And I would say finally, we made sure to contact all of our customers to see if they need any just basically, do you need help?
Yep. That's awesome.
Do you need help with anything that maybe NetApp can do to try to get you through this pandemic?
Yeah, I think that's great. And we've seen that a lot too, is that really focusing on customers, because you've already built that relationship, and they know you, and hopefully they love you. Are much more likely to respond, especially during that first early phase of the chaos that was going on. So did you, getting down to brass tacks, did you actually stop certain of your sequences or cadences and develop brand new ones that are only being used like now? Or did you just go in and modify? Or how did you guys really approach that with your new messaging and focusing on things that people are really concerned about today?
Well, we did. So basically, we did leave like our cadence is 7 attempts, right, to touch
Mm-hmm.
them over 15 days. And so we left that part of it, but we did adjust in terms of we wanted to do more in mail, and we adjusted the messaging within the cadence. Now, I will say we do have different cadences if it's like a hot lead versus just a regular lead. It might be shorter, but mostly it was changing the messaging around what we're doing to make sure, again, we're being empathetic to what the customer needed us or may want to talk about with us.
Yeah, yeah. Did you see reduction in inbound? Can you talk about that? And so was mostly it all outbound, or because you guys are an essential business, did you still see a lot of inbound happening?
We still had some inbound. I mean, it didn't completely dry up, so we still had inbound leads. It was definitely lower than than the run rate. So we did try to make up some of that with some outbound campaigns. Again, they were targeted specifically on VDI, business continuity, and disaster recovery.
Mhm.
I would say in the month of April, we ended up at between 50 and 70% of average. Like average varies because it depends on number of inbound versus outbound. So we were definitely lower than typically we are, but it wasn't zero. So we were still able to get leads, and people were still talking to us, but the volume was definitely down overall.
Yeah. One thing that I don't think you and I have talked about in the past, particularly about now, but just kind of came to me. We have a lot of clients that really depended on event strategies
Hmm.
to bring in a bunch of leads for them. And obviously, on-site events aren't happening, but as with Ring DNA, they've been awesome at being able to really be flexible and agile and create these online events and replacement. How have you guys, have you seen anything happen with NetApp in that arena?
Well, we definitely had our customer event insight. Our Insight Europe, we'd already had the one here for our last fiscal year. So all of those events were converted to virtual events. And so we did get leads from that, but clearly the broader industry that aren't our events, they weren't converted, or in most cases they weren't converted. And so therefore there were fewer overall events, but certainly our marketing team, our field marketing / go-to-market team is looking at virtual events can we do going forward, whether
Or
it's something that we create or we partner with either one of our partners or potentially with another vendor to do those events. So
okay,
I think they
good.
still work. There's just a
Yeah.
lot fewer
Yeah.
events happening.
Yes. And did you find any difference in any of the events between events that were geared, these online events that were geared maybe toward your customer base versus, more in general or trying to develop new business?
Well, most of our events shifted install base with some new buyers in there. So most of it shifted to that. I don't think we've seen as many events with just focus on new buyers. I think that would be much harder
Much
to
harder to
execute
do.
on these days, just because those new buyers are probably just busy keeping their house in
Yes.
order today.
Yes. Yeah. Was there something that you guys tried that you found that didn't work, that you scrapped and moved on to something else?
I thought about this question before. I mean, I do think we were pretty lucky in the fact that we were able to shift really quickly. We had a great sales enablement team and a crisis management team. They were able to help us shift quickly. So I don't feel there's
Awesome.
nothing large that we felt or I felt that we did that was really a bomb that was
Mm-hmm.
terrible. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe there were
Okay.
some small things on the side or locally, but most of the things were pretty effective, as effective as they could have been during this
Yeah, good
situation that we're in.
situation. Yeah, yeah. With LinkedIn, you mentioned you guys really switched to a lot more of that. Did you find good engagement or just people accepting, invites to connect? Did you try the because you can do a phone call, you can call them if you're a first person, connection. Have you guys
Yes.
tried that at all?
We're just, going through the whole LinkedIn process. Obviously, if they're a connection, they have the right number in there, we'll take advantage of that. And there's some tools that you can leverage to, find that information more easily, because I know you can't really export and things on LinkedIn. So we definitely take advantage of those tools. I would say overall, if they had a need, they were responding in terms of becoming engaged. And clearly there's a lot of people who were too busy. Maybe they just connected, they didn't respond.
Yep.
I don't know that we didn't see a huge difference in our approach other than we used it more. But I think that overall, it's kind of like just using it regularly. If they have a need, they'll respond to you. And if you've done a good job, you can't just say, hey, I want a meeting. That's not the right way to initially approach people on LinkedIn. You need to provide value and make sure that you're trying to build a relationship with them before you actually go and try to set a meeting up. And so part of it is time to go through that process. In fact, sometimes I think there's a longer runway for that than, a lot of other things, but it ends up being a more quality runway once you've taken the time to establish that relationship. So I think part of that is still, we just started it in the March timeframe. So some of those are still just developing because it is a longer runway.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So let's talk more about like on the sales side of things. And I know you're a public company, so just tell me if you, for some of the things, if you can't answer or not. But as I had mentioned earlier in the setting the context, our April research, we found that companies that had deal sizes of really 100K to 150 were the most optimistic of like really hitting their targets in Q4 of this year, calendar year. How does that compare with what you guys are feeling at NetApp? Can you talk at all about that?
Well, certainly for the cloud business, I mean, I think cloud is kind of always a land and expand business anyway. You typically need to land your first workload, and that's going to be a smaller deal. And then depending on how you're set up, you might have salespeople just landing new logos. And in a perfect cloud structure, you would then, after a certain period of time, you would pass that over to a customer success team where they would help with the adoption and expansion and renewals. So we kind of see that as best practice, just to get in and find one workload to start with. And that's a smaller deal, and then it grows. So that might not even be $100,000 to start with. It could be much smaller than that. And that also does depend on the segment. It's going to be smaller for a more commercial oriented segment. I think the other thing we see is, instead of land and expand, it's like POC and expand. So you're doing a POC, and if you can get them comfortable enough, they may do the larger deal initially, depending on how much storage and, how many nations they're trying to run through our platform. So I think that either way, you have to start out with some like test or trial or POC or maybe a small land, and then get them to expand. So from that perspective, I think we're optimistic overall, just because what we've seen with the pandemic is there's more interest in cloud than before, and there was already a good amount of interest. And if you look at all the industry analysts, they're predicting that cloud really takes off after this is over. So from that perspective, general industry wide, I think we're going to see a lot more cloud sales. So that, of course, has my team really excited. And even as we kicked off our new fiscal year for us, I feel like we're getting, more interest in cloud. Like we're getting more leads coming in, and also in geographies that we are smaller, like say Asia Pacific. We're like, wow, we've got a lot more than we anticipated having at this point in time in the year. So I think that's a good precursor, I'll just say.
That's great. That's great. Good. So you are being more, even though you're a really big company and have been around for a while, you guys are really being a lot more agile and flexible in your sales motions and what you're doing to get people hooked in and using your products.
I would say so. And again, I'm specifically talking about our cloud business, not only because that's what I'm involved with. And I don't think we have a choice. Cloud is supposed to be fast. So we have to get out of the gate fast. And it's just something that drives that speed. And the other thing we've done at NetApp is, we're on a different platform, on different CRM with different applications than the core team, and we're in the process of moving there. We're just getting there, and we're adding all the different applications. So I think that's going to enable us to move much more quickly going forward.
Yeah,
It'll just
that's
make
great.
it much more agile, and we'll have it access to, the AI type tools, predictive and guided selling, and help us to be more personalized with our buyer engagement.
That's great. I was going to say that would probably be a good time, and we'll skip ahead a little bit and talk about, what are you really looking for your set of tools to help you become more agile and move quicker to get these people hooked? What is really key for you guys?
Okay, well, I'll just put it in categories. So we of course have that to start with, and we have a platform that does cadence management for us, like we talked about earlier. So it tells us how many calls over how many days, and it just pops it up so the rep knows to do it. They don't have to manually track that, and it logs all their activity automatically. So again, we're trying to minimize their amount of administrative work so they can focus on talking to either existing customers or potential buyers. We're also looking at some additional AI type of tools that will help us be predictive in terms of opportunity propensity to close,
Love
propensity
it.
to connect for a digital sales rep, and also that will put the intelligence around our forecasting, right? Once you get some
Nice.
history in there, a tool could actually make forecasting more accurate than a sales leader, just because it has that history, and
Yes.
they're crunching all these numbers that no human person can do like that fast. So we're looking at those types of tools. Also recording tools that give us inference-based recording and listen to the reps in their conversation and make sure we have some of these, but more of it's like integrating it into a single platform, making sure that we understand the conversation, they're handling objections correctly. And our NetApp U learning organization is actually launching yet another tool that will also help us with sales training and monitoring whether the reps are really understanding the positioning and delivering it correctly. So that is going to help us also with covering the reps. And I think one thing on tools today, like we talked about before, Sally, is that there's I don't know if it's a new role or expanded role for your sales enablement person, because now they're not just maybe guessing what the training is. They can look inside these tools and say, which reps are missing which things, and they can put together that type of targeted training in addition to management coaching. But the other thing is, with these cadence tools, you're having your messaging loaded in your system. So somebody has to take the marketing messaging, translate that into sales speak, and put it in your platform. But then they need to look at conversion rates. And instead of just having marketing doing A/B testing, your sales team now can do A/B testing on their messaging to see what's resonating better. And then the one that resonates better, you can obviously implement for everyone. And you can continue to do that along with measuring your customer engagement. You can see what they're responding to and things like that. So I think that's either a person now has to add that to their job, or maybe there's two people, one works in the tool and the other does the more broader strokes of sales enablement, setting up the trainings with the marketing team or the sales training team or the product team.
I love that, Lori, and I'm glad you brought that. I was going to ask you about that because I think it's so important. And I think that going through this pandemic has really shown for some companies, it was really hard for them to turn off their sequences or their cadences, or to know which ones the reps shouldn't be using, because there's no one paying attention to the tool, and they've grown way out of control. There's way too many sequences and cadences in the tools. They're not the right ones. Reps have been allowed to write their own, and that's kind of gone unmonitored in many instances. And so I think it really has pointed out, going through this, the need, somebody's got to own that and pay attention to all of it, and pay attention to those the KPIs that you've got in there and the metrics, and to know, I'm turning off this sequence because it's not performing as well as this one. And I don't care, Mr. Rep, if you created it and want to use it, it's not performing. And there's another one that is performing way better you should use. And to be able to do that A/B testing.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome that we really need to start looking at that role. And who's going to own it and
Right.
make it happen. So I think that's great. And sales enablement, operations, maybe jointly, but I think that's great that you're looking at and putting someone in charge of that.
Well, thanks, Sally. And you make a great point. When you have reps creating all their own cadences, you can end up with like 500 different choices in your tool. So as an example, for our digital sales team, we have 2 cadences. One's for hot leads and one's for everything else, but we have different messaging. So you can run a cadence, but you pull in your message for disaster recovery, or your messaging for business continuity, because we've actually vetted out these cadences versus other cadences.
Yep.
So we feel like these work. But now it's just, is the messaging working? So you can have an A/B test on the messaging for business continuity and see that, but don't allow your reps to go creating all their own stuff, because you will end up with it being impossible for anybody to find what they need to do right then.
Yep, absolutely. Great. So tell me about, have you guys really seen, whether it's in your digital response team or in the sales team, different drastically different conversions, different KPIs that you're measuring them on, during COVID versus pre-COVID, I guess, let's say.
Well, overall, we haven't changed what the KPIs are. So, if we're still looking at, even though it's not as much of a just to be in the industry, we still look at, number of calls, number of connects, emails, in-mails. We still look at that, because part of it is with everybody working from home. We got to know if your reps putting in the effort, if they're able to, and they're, don't have, family issues or something. Because if they're not making the number and they don't have the activities, that's a pretty clear path. If they have the activities and they're not making the number, then what's the next thing to look, to look at to figure out what's happening there. So I think that's to still have the same metrics. Since we don't tell people, oh, you have to make 50 calls a day or 100 calls a day. That's not one of our KPIs. We really just give them the outcome-based result. We haven't really changed the amount, but we're just making sure we're monitoring it to see, well, what's possible right now in terms of activities to get to the end result. Because as I mentioned earlier, the results are, certainly for the digital sales team with leads, qualified leads, that was lower. And so we just we're aware of that, but we really haven't actually changed the goals. Not yet. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
We're not sure if we're going to change the goals. I think we're fortunate, though, because this happened at the cusp of our fiscal year. We didn't really need to change anything last year. And since our fiscal year started at the end of April, we were able to set goals going forward based on what we learned in March and April. So we did kind of have an ability to reset, but it was the beginning of fiscal year, so it may not be as visible, to the reps.
That's a great point. And so for companies that their fiscal year maybe started in January, that's why we've seen a lot of people resetting now because we didn't, obviously we had no clue about this at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I do want to ask you about is in last month's VP of Sales Forum that you're a member of, we had Evan De La Torre from the Challenger sales team, come in and talk about the Challenger customer. And what he had said, what I found was fascinating in a survey that the Challenger sales did, was that how we sell as salespeople has much greater impact on our buyers than what we're actually selling. So are you guys doing, we talked a little bit about sales enablement, but is there anything specific or different that you guys are doing in bringing sales enablement into the fold to really help you guys out during this time?
Well, yeah, we actually have, in my particular team, we have a position open for sales enablement. And so it's a dedicated person just for cloud, which we didn't have last year. So we're investing more. And I have somebody who's acting in that role right now so we don't get behind. And we've really spent a lot of time, being that this is the first month of our fiscal year. And I did have a fairly newly formed team. Teams came from different parts of the company. So we spent this month getting everybody like on the same baseline. Part of that was products and use cases, but also in terms of, we use a methodology called value selling, just to make sure that they're focused on having the right sales skills and being consistent. But I heard something similar, Sally, obviously I saw the presentation you mentioned, but also from Gartner, that one of the key things today is to ensure that you give your buyer confidence in buying your product, because the buyer they have so much going on at their company. Half the time they don't even know the 9 other people that are part of the decision, because it's gone from 5.8 a few years ago to about 10 people now that are making a decision. So they may not know those people. Their procurement process could have even changed since COVID, right? Maybe it's gotten tougher because people are watching their cost more. So they have a lot to get through in their own company, and they cannot with, I bought something that doesn't work, because cash is king now, spending money is difficult. So they certainly cannot afford to spend money on something and have it not go well. So part of your role as a salesperson is to give them confidence and assure them, and then deliver on your assurances that, hey, it's going to work. B, it's going to solve your business problem. Follow up and make sure it works, because buyers just don't have the confidence they had. And so that lengthens your sales cycle. So it's not good for a seller if you can't get your buyer confident. And I think the other element of confidence is they're getting hit by so much information. So if it's storage or whatever the product is that your particular company's selling, you have a lot of competitors. There's a ton of information in the market. Supposedly people are 70% through their purchase process before they contact a salesperson. But where are they in the 70%? You've got to vet out and not take them backwards, but also make sure that last 30% is assurances and confidence building.
Right. Show them and can help them out tremendously. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
So last thing.
Weeding out some of that information they're getting to give them, streamlined view.
Absolutely. So last thing. So as we're moving forward, the country's starting to reopen. I saw the Bay Area, one of the last few, is starting to reopen. That was just announced. So how is that going to impact your virtual sales cloud team, working from home? How do you keep the learning and best practices going?
Well, we've done a lot of things already with our teams. So like for me personally, I just make sure there's some connection point every week, whether that's my own sales kickoff, or maybe I record a video and send out to the team, or say, here's your top 5. We started with top 5 best practices for working with home, or top 10 best ways to lead a remote team. So I'm trying to do something each week for my team. I have a IM setup called Ask Lori. So if they want to ask me anything, they can ask me anytime. And then from the leader perspective, everybody's having a stand-up call every day, just kind of kick off the day. And they're maintaining their one-on-ones and coaching sessions. And I think going forward with the product I mentioned, we're getting to help with coaching either on use cases and products, or just having the KPI dashboard to see, is your rep doing the activities, or I've listened to your had the trouble with these objections. Continuing to make sure they're coaching each week. And also we have a schedule of lunch and learn. So making sure, A, you're taking a break for lunch, because sometimes you're working way more with these Zoom meetings. And B, we're providing some kind of informational value. So I think those are important going forward. But on a different note, I think that, virtual sales teams are really well equipped, because we've been selling remotely. I think one of the key things we're going to see is, buyers still make sense from a field selling perspective to have you come in. It might be just too much work to have you go into their location. So I think the actual virtual selling part for everyone is going to be extended for quite some time. And we're not going to be able to get back to some of those face-to-face visits and things that we really enjoy doing as quickly as we'd like to do it. And so that probably says that every salesperson should be adopting virtual selling techniques to be more effective.
Absolutely. They should go to their virtual sales teams and make sure that, you know, they've adopted already, or, you know, learning from them is what else to adopt that they should bring into their fold, and vice versa. I think the virtual sales cloud teams out there and inside sales teams can learn from the field sales as to how you navigate
Mhm.
large buyer committees that we've got today. Or in some cases, I know we're finding, you know, the only person that can sign off on deals is the CEO or CFO. So how do
Yeah.
you get or make sure that you're adequately represented when they take that to the CEO or the CFO for purchase? But anyway,
Absolutely. I
Lori,
think it is both ways to that,
yeah,
Sally. Thanks for
yeah.
sharing that. Great.
Absolutely. I know we're probably way over our time, but thanks so much, Lori. I really appreciate your time and sharing what you guys are learning and doing, so that hopefully we all can help out each other as we're going through this kind of crazy time and unprecedented, where that's all we can do is learn from each other right now.
Yeah, thank you, Sally. And thank you to Ring DNA. We really
Yes.
appreciate this opportunity to be able to share information. And we hope that it's really valuable for all the attendees to your session.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ring DNA.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.